welcome to the Chai Center and welcome to the Chai Academy. We have been discussing various interesting Jewish personalities, and some good, some bad, some ugly. And today's discussion is going to be the Vilna Gaon. So the Vilna Gaon, first of all, Gaon means genius. Right? His name is Eliyahu of Vilna, but he was called the Vilna Gaon, the genius of Vilna, or the Vilna genius. That was his title. That was given to him. It's almost like compatible to say, you're no Einstein. So to say to a Jewish kid, you know Vilna Gaon, it's comparable, because the Vilna Gaon is the strictly Jewish Einstein. Einstein was also Jewish, but he was for the world. The Vilna Gaon is for the Jewish people, as to what Einstein was for the world. However, while Einstein in his youth was no Einstein, the Vilna Gaon in his youth was. So in his youth, they say by the time he reached 6 years old, he was studying the Torah, the Bible, the Talmud, on his own. He no longer had the need for a teacher, and they say that the teachers couldn't even keep up with his mind, with his with the speed of his learning. At 7 years old, think of a 7-year-old today. So at 7 years old, he gave a sermon. He gave a main sermon He gave a sermon in the main shul, in the main sanctuary in Vilna. So much so that the chief rabbi of Vilna, he said, okay, so this child was put up to it. He's an actor. He was told what to say, and he delivered a speech for 20 minutes, but he was given the information. So the chief rabbi of Vilna said, I want to meet with this kid. He met with the kid. And his theory was this kid was put up to it and really doesn't know his stuff. And after meeting with the child for a few minutes, he scratched his head and he said, oh my goodness, this child is a real genius. He's a child prodigy. And this is at 7 years old. So any doubt that the chief rabbi of Vilna had as to the brilliance of this child was taken aback. So any doubt he had was removed. They say the Vilna Gaon used to study 18 hours a day. So 18 hours a day he used to study. The rest of the time, was for prayer and a little bit of sleep. I'm sure some nutrition, but 18 hours a day. And one of his prime students, was once asked, why does he need to study 18 hours a day? I mean, he knows all the basic texts. He has a photographic memory, and he's gone over and over and over. Why does he still need 18 hours a day? So the student gave it was an interesting answer. The student said, okay, if the Vilna Gaon studies 18 hours a day, then the great rabbis of Germany will study 6 hours a day. And if the great rabbis of Germany study 6 hours a day, then their counterparts in England will study 2 hours a day. And if the rabbis in England, United Kingdom, study 2 hours a day, then the Jews of England will be familiar and they will keep Shabbat. He says, however, if the Vilna Gaon only studied 10 hours a day, then the great rabbis in Poland would study 6 hours a day. And that means the German rabbis, illustrious German rabbis, will only study 2 hours a day. And that means the United Kingdom, the rabbis would study a half hour. And what's going to happen to Shabbat in the United Kingdom? So that was the answer, because he raised the bar of all scholars to try and emulate the Vilna Gaon. It's interesting, his writings were not really published while he was alive. They were published posthumously. And what's interesting about his writings is that in his Torah knowledge and his pursuit in understanding Torah, he was all truth. And he was one of the very rare scholars who would actually say, this piece of Talmud is there's a flaw in this Talmudic thinking. Now, I would never say that. I don't know anybody that would say find fault in the Talmud. It would it would be arrogance for me to do so, and arrogance for anybody I know to do so. But the Vilna Gaon, in his pursuit of truth, whether he was right or wrong, felt that he could do this because of his just knowledge, tremendous knowledge. He never took a position as a rabbi of the city or the rabbi of a synagogue. He never went onto the Beth Din, the rabbinical court of law in Vilna. He wanted to be free from communal pressures. Right? So he did not want a job that would distract him and disrupt him from his study and from his writings. So that is, I'm not sure exactly how he survived, to be honest. I'm not sure what his source of income was. Because, when you're a rabbi, you get paid a stipend. If you're on the Beth Din, you get paid a stipend, something. But he wouldn't take a job. He just studied and wrote. And in fact, in his later years, when he did become involved in more communal matters, in other words, he took on more than his study, more than learning, what happened was, and it's a very sore subject really for a guy like me, what happened was it turned into a disaster and a fiasco. So the Vilna Gaon, he was convinced that the Hasidic way of thinking, which was relatively new, under the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov founded Hasidic thinking, right? And then you had the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, of Lubavitch, right? He was the first Lubavitch Rebbe. He brought it to more and more people, etc. So the Vilna Gaon was based on stories that he was told by students. He felt he needed to do something because he was convinced that the Hasidim, this new sect of Jews, were a threat to Judaism. What didn't he like? So he didn't like that they were a few things. They were ecstatic when they davened, when they prayed. So normally when people pray, you pray quietly, and you're in control of your emotions, etc. They were just in full rapture. So he didn't like that. He also didn't like is that there were certain times of prayer. You have to finish the morning prayer by this time. You have to the afternoon prayer by this time. The Shema, the daily Shema, the daily creed of the Jewish people has to be said by this time. And they ignored it. They were so involved in their prayers, and it took them so long, and with such rapture and such emotion, is that they ignored the time frame. Because they felt the time frame would demean and take away from their prayers. Oh, we have to finish by this time and that time. So he didn't like their prayers and their lack of discipline in terms of time. He didn't like the reverence of the Baal Shem Tov, of the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, of Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. They revered their Rebbe. They just revered these holy people, these leaders. And he says, you know what? It's too much reverence. It's too much reverence. Now, the Vilna Gaon was revered as well, but he felt that they put too much weight in what the Rebbe said, and they did. The belief was that when a holy person speaks, he's not speaking from his own, he's not regurgitating his own nonsense, but rather he's speaking with the holy tongue. It's almost like divine prophecy. So that we do revere our Rebbe, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, passed away 27 years ago. We just celebrated his yahrzeit. When he spoke, we listened, and we felt that when he spoke, it wasn't just an opinion. It was more of his words were sacrosanct and holy and a call to order, and the Vilna Gaon didn't like that. It was foreign. He also did not like where the holy Arizal, who was a Kabbalist, who basically espoused that the God is everywhere. God is everywhere, and not only God is everywhere, there's individual divine providence. And not only with human beings, but there's individual divine providence in this world, that even a blade of grass is looked over by God. Where at that time, now more and more people have taken that on to be a truism, but at that time, the Vilna Gaon felt that it was close to pantheism, that it wasn't correct, that God doesn't control individual blades of grass. That's too mortal. That's too physical, but rather there's a general energy. Yes, God created the world, of course, and God gave an energy, and the energy is what creates the world. The Arizal says no. God tells the wind to blow, and God cannot look away from the world because God created it from nothing into something. And in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe fleshes out this point, and he says that if you have a carpenter that takes a trunk of a tree, and makes a beautiful, gorgeous oak table with matching chairs, wooden chairs, he's not a creator. What he did was he took wood and he fashioned it from one shape to another with a little bit of glue and nails. Likewise, the maker of a Swiss watch with precision work, with hairline springs, he also didn't create it. There was metal. He made sure that he cut the metal into very, very thin pieces. The metal he made flexible. And little pieces he put together, but by no means did he create. Yes, he took all these pieces and created something, but these pieces existed. God had already made them. God, on the other hand, creates this world from nothing. There was nothing prior. So because there was nothing prior, God has to constantly remain vigilant and constantly create the world. It's almost like a light bulb, fluorescent light bulb, is this constant energy going through it. And sometimes you can actually see it, can see it pulsing, right? Pulsating. Is because the light bulb needs constant energy to give light. The same idea as God needs, because he created this world from ex nihilo, from nothing into something, there's constant energy. So the Vilna Gaon felt that was pantheism, or close to pantheism, and he didn't like it. Once again, he was also fed. He was also fed much negativity and false libels, if you will, against the Hasidim. They tell a story that somebody told the Vilna Gaon that they saw the Hasidim eat on Tisha B'Av. The saddest day of the year, which is a Jewish fast day for all Jews because of the destruction of the temple. Yes, they did eat on Tisha B'Av, but that year Tisha B'Av fell on Shabbat, on Saturday. Everybody ate on Tisha B'Av. You're not allowed to fast Tisha B'Av when it comes out on a Saturday. Instead, it's pushed. It's deferred until Sunday. So, but they were fed. They fed him nonsense. So much so that in 1781, and then again a number of years later, he actually wrote, which is very political. He wrote a bill of excommunication, a bill of cherem. Excommunication meaning that you cannot transact business with somebody who is of the Hasidic sects. You cannot let your child marry their child. You cannot include them in the quorum. It was terrible. It was a division of all divisions. And it was very unfortunate because it reached a point where Hasidim were 40-50% of Jewry in Eastern Europe. So you had 50% not talk to the other 50%. It was as close to a civil war as you can get without blood. There was damage, and we'll talk about the damage, but it was a terrible thing. And unfortunately, he was on the forefront. Vilna Gaon was at the forefront of this dispute. And he, in fact, he said, if I, the Vilna Gaon, was able, I would be, and his name was Elijah, I would be like the Elijah on Mount Carmel. Elijah on Mount Carmel, he killed 450 priests of Baal, of the idol worship. He says, I would like to kill 450, which was probably the most radical thing anybody had said up until then. In other words, he said he despised Hasidim so much to the point where their life was not worth anything. And it got worse before it got better. So in 1797, he passed. I think he was 70 something. And when he passed, there was a rumor that Hasidim, when they heard that the Vilna Gaon had passed, they danced. They danced the day away, the night away. Ah, the wicked witch is dead, which was actually not true. The Hasidim, based on their rebbes and their mentors, and there are letters from the Alter Rebbe, from the first Chabad Rebbe, where he writes, do not antagonize, do not respond, right? The truth will come out. With no need to get into a fight, God forbid. The Alter Rebbe wanted peace. So to say that they danced essentially on his grave was not true. But because those rumors were spread, and rumors are dangerous, as we know, false rumors create a lot of damage. So the followers of the Vilna Gaon, some followers, some rogue followers perhaps, decided that they need to pay. The Hasidim need to pay. And the head of the Hasidim was Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the first Chabad Rebbe, the author of the Code of Jewish Law, the author of the Tanya, the author of the Likutei Torah, Torah Or, many other books, a genius in his own right, and a holy man in his own right. So what they did is they went to the Tsar, and they said to the Tsar that the head of this Hasidic movement, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of followers, has committed treason. He is supporting the Turkish Ottoman Empire, which are looking to topple the Tsarist regime and looking to topple the Tsarist Empire, and they are traitors. Now, it was laughable, but there was a little bit of truth. There was a barley of truth. The Alter Rebbe was sending money, collecting money, and sending it to Jews who lived in Palestine, as it was called, by the Romans, and which was in Israel, which is Israel, which was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. So the money wasn't going to the Ottoman Empire to topple the Tsar. The money was going to Jews, poor Jews in Hebron and Jerusalem to buy bread. So once the Tsar investigated and said, oh, there's money going to the Ottoman Empire, the Alter Rebbe was arrested for treason and sentenced to death. He was placed in prison, and in prison is where he actually dedicated his Tanya, 53 days, 53 chapters, and eventually he was exonerated, and it became the happiest day of Hasidic heritage, the 19th day of Kislev, which is in December usually. It's a week before Hanukkah, and it's a celebration where, you say, Hasidim and Hasidic way of thinking were exonerated. And it's called the New Year for Hasidus. And so the Alter Rebbe went from chains to being this famous leader who miraculously was released from prison. So that's where it got worse. And the acrimony. The Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, do not antagonize, even to the point that they put me in prison. Do not antagonize. Do not. This is all a big misunderstanding. So we fast forward to today. We fast forward to 2021. The Vilna Gaon, his writings, his expounding of the Talmud, his clarity of law is accepted by all. Hasidim, non-Hasidim, non-Hasidic Orthodox, which are called Litvish. They live in Lakewood is a big enclave, and in Flatbush is a big enclave, Borough Park, etc. But he's accepted by all because, what the mind cannot do. It's a Jewish proverb. What the seichel can't do, time will do. So they let a little time go by, and eventually this rift became a non-issue. And a main reason why ultimately it became a non-issue, where today there's really very, very, there is a Chabad house in Lakewood, just to give you an idea. So there's Hasidic and there's a Hasidim living in Lakewood, which is the Mecca of the Vilna Gaon's teachings, because it's meaningless. They have a common enemy. So back in Eastern Europe, the common enemy was the Enlightenment movement, the Vasetskia, essentially the secularist Jews who were organized. Not the individual secularist Jews, but rather those Jews who wanted to close the yeshivas in Russia. Come on, it's enough. We have to assimilate. And so the Hasidim and the non-Hasidim gathered together and forged a union to combat the new enemy, the enemy that was trying to fight their soul, the enemy which was all and spread all over Europe. There were many yeshivas that were closed down. There were in Germany, in Russia, in Poland, in Ukraine, in Lithuania, right? And so the Vasetsky, the Enlightenment movement, really did a lot of damage. But it brought them together. So now, no longer were hundreds of thousands of Jews quarreling and quibbling with hundreds of thousands of Jews, but rather they focused their attention on the Vasetsky and had a campaign to counteract their charges, even to the point of their own detriment, because some of these who opposed were either killed or sent to gulags, and sometimes they were victorious. So the bottom line is the Vilna Gaon will live on. His teachings live on. He's a revered teacher, and just like by many of the greats, in yeshivas they don't say the Vilna Gaon said. They said, what does the Vilna Gaon say? What does Rashi say? What does the Rebbe say, because these people live on, because their teachings live on. And the Vilna Gaon is one of the people whose teachings live on and will live on forever. God bless, and feel free to share if you have any questions. See, it was a pretty quiet crew today. It's rabbi at thechaicenter.com or here, Facebook. Please feel free to share this video. This video and other videos can be found shortly on the thechaicenter.com /academy.